Dr. Dick Forslund is joining us on the line. He's from the Alternative Information and Development Center. We're going to speak about the report recently released by the organization on marijuana and Lonmin. Dr. Forslund, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, won't you please set the scene for us? Explain why your organization undertook to do this research on Lonmin and specifically marijuana.
Well, it was not really the organization formally as such, and I have understood afterwards that it's important. So it was more like a request to me. But of course, I'm a senior economist at AIDC, so that plays a role here. But there was a set of researchers who was asked to be background peer to the research leader at Marijuana Commission, Dr. Carrie Forrest. And she asked me to investigate the finances of Lonmin just before the massacre, and if it would have been at all feasible or possible for Lonmin to meet the demands of the rock operators and start to negotiate about sizable wage increases. So that was kind of like the setting. You know that the Rockville operator demanded 12,500 rand in hand, you can say, after taxation. That is how I interpret it in this report. So that was the background. It was about the competitiveness of the Rockville operator worker wages at Lonmin. If it would have been possible for Lonmin to pay for the housing program which they abandoned after 2008. And the setting for the negotiations which never took place. Because as you might know, there was talks about negotiations on the evening of the 15th of August when Joseph Matunja was there and other trade union leaders. But it seems that there came a signal from the state or the police that, and Lonmin, they went for that. So next morning when the union leaders came there, then all negotiations was off the table. And instead we had this massacre.
Now, of course, this report is incredibly extensive and in-depth, but really when it comes down to the bottom line of if Lonmin could afford monetarily to pay those rock drillers that amount of money, the 12,500 rand, you would say the answer is yes.
Yeah, I would say the answer is yes. And what they would have had to do is they should have dropped a transfer of money, which they have been doing for a long time for so-called sales commissions, firstly to Bermuda and then to their head office company. That was about 250 million rand per year. I also argue in the report that they could have cut sizably, make a sizable cut in so-called management fees, which they also paid to the head office company. And lastly, of course, there's always these so-called share-based payment expenses. And the key subsidiary of Lonmin paid 100 million rand every year to Lonmin directors of such extra remuneration, which is in addition to the ordinary very high wages and salaries. And that would amount to about 2,000 rand per month and Rockville operator. And if you combine these three streams of money, you come up above 15,000 rand per month in basic payments, and after taxes that is way above 12,500. So it would be, monetary possible, yes. Politically then, it's another issue. So it's very heartbreaking to see, I think, that it was politically possible to kill 34 mine workers in this massacre and severely injuring over 100 in this shooting. That was politically possible. But obviously it's politically impossible to avoid the massacre and to start to negotiate about drastic wage increases. And I think it's kind of like extremely tragic and heartbreaking and even immoral, I think.
Absolutely. If we keep investigating through this report the ability of Lonmin to fulfill certain wishes or certain demands or even certain obligations, then we certainly will come to the mining charter obligations of housing. And that was another discrepancy that you found. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sort of when the finances were discussed at the Marijuana Commission, there seemed to be a underhand agreement that the discussion about finances should only relate to the housing program of Lonmin. And they had a legal obligation to build 5,500 freestanding houses for mine workers. And they made this commitment in 2007, 2008. And they didn't build anything, or they built 3 show houses. And the reason was a claim for poverty. But I mean, in the cross-examination of Mr. Sidat, one of the directors of Lonmin, of course, evidence leader Mr. Matthew Chaskilson, senior counselor, he brought up the payments of dividends, which continued during all this period. And as you know, payment of dividends is not a legal obligation. But building these houses, it was a legal obligation, but Lonmin failed to do so, claiming poverty. And one can say also about these programs for housing, this is a problem all across the mining industry. And one can say that if you don't build these freestanding houses for mine workers, then also the transformation of the old mining hostels is completely corrupted, because when you rebuild the mining hostels, you take a house for 80 people and you make it into a house for 20 workers. And then 60 workers must be placed somewhere else. And if you haven't fulfilled your housing program, then basically they have to go to the shacklands. And that is exactly what has happened at Lonmin.
Dr. Forslund, there is so much to speak about when it comes to this report, and unfortunately we are running out of time. But before you go, of course we know that President Jacob Zuma, many would say, is dragging his heels when it comes to releasing the Marikana report. And of course this is something that on a personal level, and certainly from what you have been researching and released in this report, you want to see this report released.
Yeah, I really hope that the judge come to a good decision now on Monday, and I would have liked the president to come to this decision himself. I know that the argument has been that he wants to rethink through what he shall say about the report. But I mean, he could have released the report anyhow for the sake of the families and the peace of mind of the families. And then he could have said to the press that I will not comment on this within 2 months, and that would have sort of solved that issue, and people would have respected that, I'm sure. So, but I hope there will be a release of this report soon. Everybody's waiting for it, and we have to come to a closure here and something, yeah. And the families need a closure.
Dr. Forslund, where can we find more information on the AIDC, and where can we find more information on your findings?
You can go to www.aidc.org.za. There you find both these reports, and you also find our submission to the Davis Tax Committee, which is a lot about the need to have a full disclosure of the daughter companies of these multinational companies in South Africa. And there we have made recommendations which we hope will influence Judge Davis when he put forward his proposal about the change in the taxation legislation.
Thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you.